I call it the monster because that's what it is. It's a monster. It's stomping out your ability to do something. It takes away anything that would scare you. Let's go back to like a child. The monster under the bed, or monster in the closet. Something that scares you. Something that is, I don't want to get up. I don't want to get out of bed. I want to stay under my blanket. I'm scared. I don't want to see the monster. I don't want to deal with it. It takes away your ability to do certain things, and that's why I call it the monster, because it sucks you, and eats you alive. And what does the monsters do? Just that.
3 months later, crowds gather in front of the White House, awaiting the announcement of Japan's surrender from President Harry S. Truman. It took 2 atomic bombs to bring Japan to her knees. But now Pearl Harbor was avenged, and the news triggered the greatest celebration the nation has ever known.
The joy of reunion dominates the whole pier as fathers, mothers, and wives embrace men, some of whom had been given up or lost. For the returning soldiers, it is the end of a long, dark night of suffering and loneliness. For the scores of relatives, it is the end of a nightmare of waiting and uncertainty. It is the answer to their prayers. Our boy is home again.
We must recognize that ending the war is only the first step toward building the peace. All parties must now see to it that this is a peace that lasts, and also a peace that heals.
It's changed, David. All the lights in the city of Baghdad are now out, from everything we can tell. My colleague Bernie Shaw is with me as we look out on this now dark city. It's absolutely pitch black. Yeah, there's a pallor of smoke over the whole city, Bernie. There were several explosions, pretty big explosions, maybe 5 or 10 miles away from where we are standing.
Yeah, when we came back, everyone sees on the news, like how when the veterans come back, like all these parades and like, hey, welcome home, welcome home. Yeah, we had, when we pulled back into Yokosuka, we had, the only ones that were on the pier were, like, say, for example, if a guy had a wife or a girlfriend that could get on, they were there. So it was like spouses and kids. But like me at the time, I didn't have anyone, along with a bunch of other guys. So when we got back, it was unload the gear, put it on the truck, hop on a bus, drive back to our base, which was at Sugi, which was over an hour away. And on the way back to the barracks, we would come up with a plan. Hey, you going to the EM Club? Yeah, I'll be at the EM Club. All right, I'll see you there. Let's get a beer. That was it. No, hey, welcome home, I was so proud of you. It was none of that. It was like, okay, dump your sea bag off. And you take a shower, change clothes, and go to the EM Club and get your drink on. Yeah, that was it,
Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
I remember the plane landing, and we were marched into a large hangar where there were bleachers set up. And I actually didn't have knowledge of anybody coming to be there. There were no plans. So I was surprised when I looked out into the bleachers and I happened to see my dad. And he had made his way down to Campbell because at that time he had recently finished his contracting work in Iraq. It took several hours to finally be released. There was a long time of just all the family members and soldiers sitting there in almost awkward silence towards the end, just as the minutes and hours ticked away, waiting for the final release for the night. But then after that did occur, then my dad had a hotel room already nearby, and we just went there and talked and caught up and had a few beers together. It meant a lot, especially since I wasn't expecting anybody to be there. It was definitely nice to have at least one person there, especially coming back from something like that.
Let's talk about a real cool project going on at Harlem High School.
9 students and instructors from Harlem High School are conducting inspiring work, developing documentaries on local veterans. The members have interviewed more than 100 veterans.
We've talked about the Veterans Project, but give people a thumbnail on what exactly it is.
Veteran Documentary and Film Production class. Tell me about the class.
Yeah, so what I'm a part of is called the Harlem Veteran Project. Basically what we do is we make documentaries for veterans in the area. Not only this, but we make documentaries for people from the home front of World War II, Korea, and now Vietnam. It's just a real cool project to be a part of.
Well, in the class, what we do is everyone is assigned a veteran, and then we get a raw interview from them, and we make a documentary for them. And throughout the year, we also host interviews for the next year's students. So this year, we're interviewing probably about 50, 60 new veterans that the students next year will get to make documentaries for.
So our particular role is, we're the ones who are creating the stories, but it's really the veterans that give us life lessons that we carry, in our lives as we go to college and stuff like that. So for us, it's just doing the right thing about giving back to the veterans who sacrificed so much for us to even be in school. So that's what we do.
So you get your interview at the start of the year, and then you work on it the entire year, and then at the end, when you when we have the gala, we present our documentaries to our veterans, and they have the disc in hand, and it's kind of like a rewarding moment that your years of work, is a product right there in front of you for that person.
My first heavy metal concert. Opening band was Kingdom Come. Second band was Metallica. Third band was Dokken. Fourth band was Scorpions. And the fifth band was Van Halen. And that was actually right up here at East Troy, Wisconsin. So I had to drive all the way with a friend of mine from the suburbs of Chicago on the back roads because we didn't want to take the highway because we didn't want to pay tolls. So it took us forever to get up there, but man, what a show. That was my first one. Not a fan of school, never really was. Tried playing football freshman year, started getting into metal music, more so my sophomore year, and started growing my hair, and the coach didn't like that, so I didn't play. It was a typical high school, I was a burnout, I was a metalhead. We don't like school. We never did. It was typical, typical. I was a rebel without a clue, and I just loved the aspect of the rebellious side of the metal music. Turn it up louder so your parents yell at you to turn it down. It was just being a rebel, and I liked it.
He was a cross-country truck driver, and there were 2 consecutive summers where I lived with him on the truck for a month at a time. And I believe it was the second summer. We were driving through Denver, Colorado. I don't remember which street it was specifically, but as we were passing by, I saw the sign for a restaurant called Casa Bonita, and I remembered from a South Park episode that was a restaurant that had been featured on the cartoon. So I pointed it out to him. I was like, whoa, did you know it was real? And then he was like, oh, no way. So we ended up stopping there for dinner since it was close to the end of his driving day anyway. They have all kinds of side things there, like a cave for kids to go through, and they have a waterfall with professional cliff divers that jump off for entertainment. And I said, what do you think they would do if I jumped off that? And he didn't think I was going to go through with it because he thought that I would chicken out. So he said, well, whatever, you can stare at it for a while longer and not do it, I'll be outside. But then as I was kind of walking around, I saw a door that said employees only that I assumed would lead up to it. And it was a door with a padlock on it. And the padlock was actually undone, and the door was cracked open about 4 inches. So I figured that that was some sort of divine intervention. So I went up the stairway, and there was a door, and I was expecting it to be a hallway or something leading to it. But as soon as I emerged through the door, I was on top of the waterfall, and everyone in the restaurant was looking at me really confused because the cliff divers are in swimsuits, and I was fully clothed. And at that point, I figured it was too late to turn around. So I noticed one of the signs that they held up that said applause sitting there. So I grabbed it and waved it around, and then the confused patrons then assumed I was part of the show and started clapping. So then I tossed the sign down and dove in after it. I didn't think it through at the time, but the perimeter of the pool is only about 20 feet diameter. So it's pretty narrow when you're 30 or 40 feet high. So, but luckily I ended up landing right in the center. But another thing I didn't factor in was I had hoped to make a somewhat speedy getaway before the staff could get a hold of me. But the outside was actually real rocks, and since they're all wet, they were really slippery. So by the time I was able to crawl out, there were security in plain clothes waiting with handcuffs.
How I explain it to people who ask what it was about, I always say that I participated in interviewing vets and Rosies and anybody who, lived during that time. And then we, put their stories into a documentary. But it's really hard because I don't think that does it justice. That's not entirely what it is. And it's really hard if you're not a part of it to truly understand what it is.
If I was pitching the Veteran Project to an outsider, I would begin by saying it's a class, but then I would have to rephrase myself and say it was more than just a class to us. Because for a class, it's a regular 45-minute period, but with the Vet Project, you spend countless hours and time, and you don't really mind it is the thing. You enjoy every second of it, spending with veterans, with the teachers, with your classmates especially, and it'll inspire you to do more after the class. It'll change your perspective on things, and that's probably the best thing I did in high school.
So before I took the class, I was never a huge history person. I didn't like sitting down and reading a textbook. I was like, why do I care? I'm doing it to pass my grade. And then I also feel like for a lot of high school, students are like doing things for them. So I feel like when you take the Vet Project, it's like the first time a lot of kids do something for someone else. Like something that's bigger than them. And I think that's really cool.
Just having the experience, it was completely unique. It's not something that a lot of high schoolers get to say that they've done once they're, graduated high school. Like, not very many can say that they made a documentary, and not only that, but they got to have a bond with someone outside of their family, outside of their high school and stuff that's so particular and so special.
I think the time and effort that goes into it. You'll hear kids talk about, oh my gosh, I have to go in on Saturday, I have to go in on breaks, and they just complain about it, but they love being there.
It was a very stressful time, and to keep going, to keep pushing forward, to finish that documentary, and to make it the best I possibly could for Elmer Olsen and his family, I learned a sense of, tenacity. Like, I have to keep going, I have to push forward, I have to get this done. I can't not get this done.
There's a lot of pressure, and it's kind of nerve-wracking because it's something that, like, you invest, like, a little part of yourself into the documentary, and you try your hardest to create something that you really think is spectacular for yourself, but there's like this little voice in your head that's like, well, maybe it won't be good enough, or maybe the family's not going to like it, so you're just like trying your best to get all of your facts right, make sure everything's spelled right, and to make sure that you get like all of the stories that you really think count, and counts to not only like the story itself, but like to the families. It makes you feel pretty good, and it really makes you feel like you did something right and you did something good, and that's pretty wonderful. So it's a big part of my life, so sorry.
Well, that's actually good.
So it's just really amazing to see all of you guys here and really being so proud of it. I don't know. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
But yeah, it makes me really proud because it was something that I was really, really passionate about in high school, and I came back after my senior year, and I think I spoke at the second gala, and just seeing all of the kids and everything was very exciting, and I'm very proud of it.
The town that I grew up in, it's a good-sized town, but I couldn't see myself being there. And I woke up one day and I just said, okay, what am I going to do with my life? You know, it's like that twisted sister thing. What do you want to do with your life? Well, I wanted to rock, but I don't want to stick around here and work in a factory. And I looked at the services before during my senior year, and I signed up with the Navy. And but I just dragged my feet, and finally just realized I need to do this.
I enlisted on June 9th, 2009. I had recently dropped out of high school a few months earlier. I was living with a friend of mine who I believe at the time was about 21 or 22. Then we were splitting the rent, and I was working third shift at Taco Bell. I decided to basically because it seemed like a good opportunity for a fresh start and to do something better with my life than what I was doing.
When did you realize that basic training was different in civilian life?
The day that I got there. The moment that I got there, that I knew it was going to be a lot different. You see, I didn't give them the Navy the opportunity to cut my hair because I had long hair. I didn't give them that opportunity. I had my hair cut before I left. So it was just kind of like normal short hair. And because I always heard the horror stories, like, hey, if you had long hair and they know about it, they're going to ride you harder. So I said, yeah, okay, no, you're not going to get it from me.
A lot of us were expecting, as the bus pulled up to where we were going to be, for the drill sergeants to swarm onto the bus and start yelling, because I had seen that on a few TV shows before, and just from talking with the other guys. But what they did is they actually came onto the bus and were really polite, asking if people needed help with their bags, and they waited until we got outside and formed up until they started the swarm. So it was I thought it was funny.
It was a challenge, but as long as you kept your mouth shut, you did what you were told, and you did it in a timely manner, and you didn't make mistakes, it was easy. That was Navy. I don't know about the Marines, but the Navy, it was to me, it was actually kind of simple, but it was a little bit different from, because you had to make your bed every day. I never made my bed, and then you got to make it a certain way and put like the 3-inch fold and this. What? You're lucky if I threw the blankets over my pillow.
For a lot of guys, it seemed like their worst experience was at Fort Sill. It was called Treadwell Tower, rappelling off of that. But I actually enjoy doing things that are based off of heights, like rappelling and skydiving, bungee jumping. But for me, the hardest part was the CS gas day. And the way that they do that is you go into a room that's heavily gassed by the CS. And when you enter the room, you have a gas mask on. And then once you reach a certain point, all of you in the room are instructed to take off your gas masks. What made it especially challenging for me was actually my own fault, because one of the drill sergeants who had the gas mask on, as he was giving us our instructions when we take off the masks, after a few sentences he said something along the lines of, so are any of you brave enough to flip me off? And me being how I was at that point when I was 18, of course I did flip him off, not really thinking it through. And then I was instructed to take off my gas mask about 30 seconds or 45 seconds early while he finished the block of instructions, and then still have to follow through with everything else.
It's hard to explain. It's like when you first sit down and watch their interview, just like for the first time, it's like, okay, this guy was in the war. I'm thankful for him. And then you keep watching it and you watch it and then you finally meet him and you're just staring at his face every day, and it's just like, he just becomes part of your life. Like, I think about Gail every day, and I sent him a Christmas card this year. You know, I try and keep in touch with him. It's just somebody that, you know, I really know how to explain it. It's just like this special kind of relationship.
When you do share your story with someone, like that is what creates the bond. Like, I know a large portion of his life that's really personal and that you wouldn't just really tell anyone.
You learn so much about the person that you're doing the documentary of, but like, you haven't actually met the person. You like learn so much about them and so much about all of these really like emotional experiences that they went through, and like, you've never met them. So by the time you meet them, it's just like this really amazing thing, and you're like, oh my gosh, I know so much about you. It's like they're like some kind of little celebrity or something.
Yeah, I feel like it's you kind of just build a relationship because they've taken this time to sit down with you and explain their story, and not only that, but you literally know every detail of that story. And then meeting them, it's like kind of meeting a celebrity almost, and you just really kind of build a bond and a really special relationship that's not like anything else.
Definitely a role model, in my opinion. Someone to look up to and respect a lot. So he's just one of those people that is very proper, has very good manners, and is just one of those people that you know is very wise but doesn't really put off that feeling at first.
He has become like really close with me and my dad especially, but like, he's always friendly with my whole family. He always invites us out to dinner, and he insists on paying. When we first met, it was like a little bit weird, but now he always hugs me, and like the last time I saw him, he kissed me on the cheek, so it's like he's my grandfather almost, yeah.
It's just like an extra grandfather almost, but like in a more like distant thing. It's just like having someone that wants to keep tabs on you and you want to keep tabs on them, and it's so hard to explain to someone that's like outside of this program because it's like trying to explain why I'm talking to, you know, a 75-year-old dentist from Iowa is a little weird, but once I get to, you know, go back and explain everything, people are usually really impressed.
So I was working on my documentary one day, and Stangy pulled me out of class, and I thought I was in trouble. But he sat me down and just told me that Joe Twigg had passed away the weekend before. And right off the bat, I was kind of in shock because I had literally just seen him a few weeks before when we had went out for breakfast. And I think it just made me realize that I needed to make his documentary as good as I possibly could and put as much effort into it. I knew what I was making for him was what his grandkids and what his great-grandkids would look at to see what his grandpa went through and what his grandpa accomplished in his life.
I never actually got to meet him, and that kind of sticks with me the most because for the longest time I thought he was still around, and then halfway through the year we got that letter from his family saying he had passed away.
Dear students, thank you for your kindness to Ed. Thank you for the Grand Veterans Day card that you sent him.
I'm looking at it right now. I've placed it with Ed's high school graduation picture, the flag that was on his coffin, and a photo of him in the service. Thank you for letting Ed be a part of the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. Ed enjoyed so very much when he would meet and speak with you young people. It was an honor for him. Ed passed away on December 20th, 2012. He had a rough year health-wise, but the best occasions he attended were those involving young people.
The journey was exciting. I left, I did my basic training at Great Lakes, and then from Great Lakes I went down to Millington, Tennessee for aviation machinist mate. I became a jet engine mechanic. I went there for school. Upon leaving there, I went to San Diego, California. San Diego, California, I got specialized training in the Pacific aircraft that I was going to be working on, which was the SH-60B Seahawk helicopter. And from there, do not pass go, do not collect $100, go directly to Japan. And I went to Japan, and wow, you talk about a wake-up call. I get off the plane and I go and get my bags and everything, and I go to get in the vehicle, and I'm thinking I'm getting in on the passenger side. Wrong, I was getting on the driver's side. So I was like, okay, well, things are backwards over here. And then you're driving on the wrong side of the road. So yeah, it was a wake-up call.
If I remember right, there was a certain level of nervousness as we were landing, but then from that point on, as far as I remember on that first day, I didn't really put much thought into it just because we were kept so busy with moving all of our gear and trying to get set up and trying to take pieces of plywood or poncho liners as sort of curtains to separate, because there were 4 or 5 guys to a room. We actually had to make several of our own beds out of 2x4s and things like that, because a lot of your beds and furniture, anything that you'll use for storage in containers, it's not 100% provided, so there's a lot of scavenging. So that first day, after the necessary accountability checks, then we just made several trips back and forth with all of our gear and then did as best we could to get set up.
You know, you couldn't do nothing. You couldn't even you could just look at the aircraft. You couldn't touch them because everyone had to go through training. I had to learn to be what they call a plane captain, which was, after all maintenance is done on the aircraft, you got to inspect the aircraft to make sure there's no problems, and then give your okay, sign it off, and you're pretty much saying to the pilots that, hey, this aircraft is safe to fly. And then if I wasn't doing that, I was actually doing my job as an aircraft mechanic, you know, working on the jet engines or the rotor head or the drive shaft, anything that was mechanical, you know, drive shafts, gearboxes, tail rotor, auxiliary power unit, all that stuff was my responsibility. So I would have to maintain it.
For the QRF aspect of our responsibilities, whenever anything would happen where another platoon or unit would require our assistance, or even in some cases the local Afghan police force or Afghan army would require assistance, then we would be called via either the loudspeaker or over our radios if we were already out, and be told essentially what we have to do and where we have to go. Well, then the actual mission details would come down and be given to our platoon leader, and then from there we would be given a quick summary if time permitted. When it was a air assault mission, then I would just gather up all of my gear and head down to the LZ and then go to the helicopters once they were ready. But if it was a mounted patrol, I would have to gather all of my gear plus the 50 caliber machine gun, because it's the upper receiver and the barrel, and I would haul those to the truck, the second truck in the convoy, and set up the 50 caliber machine gun in the turret. But One of the things that made that stressful at times was I had that additional step, and setting up the 50 caliber machine gun, there's several steps to it. And I was more or less expected to be ready in the same amount of time as the other platoon members who just had to get their gear together and get to the trucks.
I was deployed in '92, and a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute, the Gulf War is over. No, the Gulf War wasn't over. The Gulf War, the initial ground attack was over. We were maintaining security in the area, so the war wasn't really over. How I found out is I got to work, and they're like, hey, Thew. I'm like, yeah, you're on a det now. I'm what? You're on a detachment. You're going to go to sea. You're going to work up, you're going to learn everything, and you're going to go to sea. And you're going to be on one of the 3 dets that's going to do that. And we're going to send you to the armpit of the world and have you wait for a ship, and then you're going to take everything over, and then you're going to finish off the cruise. That's pretty much how I found out. It was interesting. You know, here I was getting ready to be 21. So we deploy, you know, we would do all of our workups and pull into a lot, you know, just on different ships. And then get sent overseas to, or I was already overseas, but get sent over to the sandbox. And I'm on the USS Acadia waiting for the USS Fife to come in so I could take over the detachment. And guess what? I get to turn 21. I'm turning 21 years old. I got Pizza Hut pizza. And my first legal drink was a piss-warm, pardon the French, piss-warm Foster's beer. And Foster's is not even good cold, you know, and I had to pay $1 for it, you know, so that was my birthday, you know. But yeah, it was an eye-opener that I was being sent over there, you know, but you know, it was my job. It's what I signed up to do. So you know, you can't say no, I don't want to go. But yeah, you know, it was an eye-opener.
I believe that the date of the first firefight that we were in was on March 8th of 2010. And it was a mounted patrol. And our initial mission was to leave FOB Salerno and rendezvous with an EOD platoon, and we would then all go to the site of a potential IED and provide security while they disarm it and ascertain the threat level. But when we were about halfway there, we heard gunfire a few blocks away. So then we halted the convoy, and our platoon leader called it in to our superiors in Salerno and described the situation. And it was at that time that we learned that there was a nearby National Guard platoon who was under fire and engaging the enemy. So once we were given the go-ahead, we made it a few blocks away as quickly as we could. And when we pulled up, we came to find out that there were 3 relatively heavily armed combatants holed up inside of a home. And they had the National Guard platoon pinned to the point where they could not advance. And several of their members were already pretty severely wounded from the skirmish. And then once we pulled up to the scene and established that there were no U.S. or coalition forces inside of the house, then I was given the go-ahead to go ahead and open up on the structure with the 50 cal, where I was the gunner, as well as the gunner in the first truck in the convoy. So we did an initial wave of firing once we saw movement within the house through the windows. And at that time we couldn't be sure if the threat had been neutralized. So there was a pause, a momentary ceasefire, at which time I happened to be looking at one of the windows and noticed one of the insurgents going to lean out of the window to fire his AK-47. And then I was able to get him lined up in my sights as he was shooting and fire at him with the .50 caliber. I knew what it was capable of since it was originally designed as an anti-aircraft weapon, but it was still a very memorable moment once I noticed that one of the bullets had made contact. I believe that it hit the corner of his shoulder, but the whole area immediately surrounding that, it looked as though it was just completely eviscerated and turned into a pink mist. And then there was continued firing for some time. And then once the firing had stopped, I heard over the radio they were wondering if all of the threats had been neutralized. And I remember being very sure that they had been. So myself and the gunner in the first truck, gave our go-ahead, saying that we did believe that they were all down. So then the team went in, the dismounted team that was stacked up on the outside. I remember seeing a pretty large portion of the roof exploding. It was, felt a big wave of uncertainty, just wondering what exactly had happened. And my initial thought was that both of them had passed. So the blast actually blew them both back out the door and into the hall of the home. Otherwise, if they had been trapped in the room, even without the shrapnel, they probably would have succumbed to the injuries.
My main duties is maintain the aircraft. I worked night shift, so I was the aviation machinist mate at night. Most of the time, I was doing aircraft inspections, daily inspections, which would get the aircraft ready for flight the next day. And then if there was any maintenance that needed to be done, we would do it. But a lot of times it was crud busting, making sure that the aircraft was clean, and if there started getting corrosion or rust on it, you would clean it off and preserve it and protect it. So we were always in the rear, we weren't like on the front lines, because being in the water, most of the problems were on land.
For the rules of engagement, we are absolutely not allowed to engage anybody with lethal force unless given a proper directive from superiors or unless we are engaged first. And a lot of the times, because things happen so quickly, there's not always time to get word back from superiors giving you the green light to go ahead and engage an insurgent. So a lot of the times it's just a judgment call and common sense. But that's definitely a very stressful aspect throughout the deployment, is always having that in the back of your mind, wondering if you'll make the right decision, particularly in more urban areas where there's a lot of civilians and innocent bystanders and a greater potential for collateral damage and civilians getting caught in the crossfire. That definitely adds another degree of stress.
Is there any way to identify the enemy in an urban area?
Absolutely not, no, because they, the vast majority of the time, the insurgents are just wearing plain clothes, and they look like all of the other civilians in the area. There's no way of knowing who the enemy is until they make themselves known and start engaging you. And a lot of times there's no concrete clues or evidence leading up to that. You just basically have to go through and conduct your mission or pass through, and just always in the back of your mind be ready for something to happen and never know when it will.
My senior mechanic, we just came out of a phase, and my senior mechanic was screwing up, and we were chasing this vibration. was vibration analysis. And on a helicopter, actually on all aircraft you got to do it, but on helicopters it's a nightmare. We were chasing this vibe and we couldn't get it fixed, and so I was just up 3 days chasing this thing, and if the guy would have done it right in the first place, I wouldn't have done that, you know. Yeah, it was not a good time. You know, it got to the point where I could pull a motor by myself in less than 10 minutes. Because you would have to pull the motor, change the washers and the weights on the shaft, because it was a shaft coming out of the engine that was not balancing right, and we just chasing it and chasing it and chasing it and chasing it, and he kept going the wrong way, and it would make it worse. So then we go back, and then it wouldn't get any better. So it was just a nightmare. So just chasing vibrations, and after coming out of a phase, which is an overhaul inspection where you're tearing the aircraft down and then inspecting it, building it back up, and then having to go fly and get vibration. So that's the 3-day thing, and that was the longest day of my life. You know, what can you do? Where else were you gonna go? You're not gonna go down to the bowling alley and grab you a beer and a burger. Ain't such a thing.
With all that responsibility, what's going through your head when you're working on?
You don't want to fuck up. Don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to be that guy under the microscope saying, man, you know, if I did it this way, you know, if I screw this up, you know, someone's going to die. There's a possibility. The responsibility is saying he just never wanted to screw up. You know, and it's something that I took great pride in.
It was actually the very, very early morning of August 28th in 2010. We were the first truck out the gate, and then I was driving the vehicle heading there. For whatever reason, I missed the left-hand turn to turn into the landing area. Then I started the process of getting the vehicle turned around. So then the second truck caught up and did make the left-hand turn that I had missed. And as soon as they pulled up to the impact site, somebody on a nearby rooftop fired a RPG directly at their vehicle once it stopped. Then we heard over the radio, the one on the passenger side called out that they were hit. So then we made it to that area as soon as we could. And then once we pulled up, there was an Afghan soldier. He didn't take nearly the brunt that the 2 U.S. soldiers in the front of the vehicle did, since it hit the front door. So he was able to start the process of getting them out of the truck. So when we pulled up, that's what was happening. And then one of the passengers in my truck jumped out and helped, trying to get them out and safe, since there was a bit of a fire following the explosion. Then when I got out of the vehicle, the first thing I noticed was the smell, just of the explosion and the smell of gunpowder and sulfur, and also the burning steel. And then what I eventually would find out really soon after was the smell of the sergeant that was in the truck. He was burning pretty badly. I couldn't really hear much or see much just because it was so dark. And there was a lot of radio chatter, people trying to figure out exactly what was going on. And then also the screaming from the burns. And at that point I noticed, even though it was dark, I saw silhouettes moving by the fence line nearby. And at first I wasn't exactly sure what, since it was just silhouettes. And I remember thinking that the silhouettes looked similar to our uniforms. But then luckily I was able to reason pretty quickly that it couldn't have been any of us. because it was on the outside of the fence. And I saw the figures coming. It looked like they were coming through under the fence. So I made the judgment call to open fire, and which is good because there were insurgents waiting. It was a planned ambush. They knew our protocol, that whenever an incoming round landed, that we would immediately go to that site to cordon it off. So they must have been dialed in very accurately to know where the mortar round would hit. But they were waiting, and there had been a hole cut in the fence, and they were starting to come through as we got there. So then I opened up fire, and then shortly thereafter, luckily, I believe it was two helicopters were able to get into the air and also give us some air support, which was definitely fortunate because we were outnumbered. I don't know exactly how many there were, but it was a considerable amount. It was a large-scale attack. And I don't know exactly how long the fighting lasted for, just because one's perception of time is pretty heavily altered in situations like that. But it seemed to last for quite a while. And because we were at the corner of the LZ, I remember it being difficult to decide where to try to take cover and which way the firing was coming from. It was hard to ascertain whether it was friendly fire or enemy fire, and from which direction. So I did my best to take cover behind one of the vehicles that was there, and then just return fire. After some time, when we had the air support, they were able to help us take out the majority of the fighters. And in a situation like that, one of the things that's hard is knowing exactly when a threat's neutralized or even where they're coming from, just because it's so dark. Because if you do equip your night vision goggles and use those, then you sacrifice a lot of your accuracy with firing, because then you're not able to line up the scope as well as you could without them, since they protrude several inches off your head. There was actually a smaller secondary force that was advancing, and they were basically coming in for a flank, and it would have been really effective against us because we weren't nearly as fortified on that side. And there was some pilots in an AC-130 airplane above us that had an aerial view of them, and they were trying to get a hold of us over the radio, telling us to back up so that we would be out of the blast radius, but they couldn't get a hold of us. So eventually the battalion commander, the lieutenant colonel, had to go ahead and give them the go-ahead to just do their best and drop it anyway. So they did, and it took out the majority of the insurgents, and luckily we didn't get hit with any of the with the brunt of the explosion. Just some of us were a little bit concussed from the blast, but that's it. We were far enough away to be out of the kill zone. And then towards the end of the fight, as the helicopters were trying to pick off some of the fleeing insurgents, one of the insurgents, armed with just a AK-47, was actually able to hit the electrical panel of one of the helicopters, the Blackhawks, and bring it down. And then at one point, a nearby guard tower was hit with an RPG. So my team was sent off to secure that tower. As we were going to secure the tower, we came under fire. At first, I couldn't identify what it was, but then I realized that it was ricochets and bullets scraping across the concrete. So then I was able to yell to one of my team members to get down as he was going up the stairs, and he was able to get low enough to not be hit by any of the bullets.
I think, at least from what I've noticed, World War II veterans come in and they think they don't have anything to talk about. They're like, oh, it was so long ago, I'm not going to remember anything, or they're super like shy about it. Whereas like Vietnam vets are a little bit younger and their memory is still a little bit fresher from it, so they kind of come in for the most part knowing what they want to talk about. So I think it's kind of neat to watch Vietnam vets like will just go off immediately and just start talking. And with World War II vets, it's kind of cool to have to like pull it out of them a little bit.
So I think a lot of the World War II veterans, I feel like they just think it was their duty to serve in the war. So when they talk about it, they just aren't usually as emotional, I think. They just don't really seem to go into as much detail. They just kind of talk about it like it's a script, like it's their story, what they had to do. They were serving their country, they were doing their duty. But with some of the Korean and Vietnam veterans, you can really see like the emotion when they're discussing their story and talking about all the people they saw getting killed right in front of them and talking about being away from their families. I feel like in some of the more recent wars, it just has hit people more.
That's, I think, some of the most emotional parts I've seen in some interviews have been Vietnam veterans talking about coming home or how it felt because they didn't get that welcome home. So they get kind of sad, and you can kind of see like the change in their face when they think about it. Whereas like World War II veterans are like, oh, I went home and saw my family and it was great. Everyone was excited. And then Vietnam veterans are like, well, no, I got my face spit in and we had to take our uniforms off right away.
The difference was with World War II and with Korea, they came home to support groups, family, friends. Everyone was behind them, supported what they did. And I think that made it a little easier. With Vietnam, you had the struggle of coming home and people disagreed with you did. You were just doing your duty for your country, and you came home to people saying, you're a baby killer, you're a disgusting waste of space, pretty much.
They've never been able to tell their stories. They've never felt like they could open up and tell anyone about the things that they did, and they've been internalizing a lot, and just over the years they just can't take it and they need to let it out.
I just think that if someone knows a veteran, you should ask them to hear their story. If they don't want to tell you their story, then you should respect that. But if someone is willing, and especially if they want to tell you their story, you need to listen to them, because sometimes them just sharing their story is what needs to happen so they can heal.
At that point, by the time we got to some of the bodies, several hours had passed. I remember the smells, definitely, just because it was so hot and sunny that day. Then a lot of the bodies were charred also from explosions and things of that nature. Plus, by the time we got to some of them, rigor had set in, so scanning their fingers was difficult in a lot of cases. A few of the times we had to dislocate the finger joints to be able to scan all of them correctly. I really can't think of a way to adequately cover something like that when that many lives are affected, and especially when that many lives are taken. I'm not sure that there truly exists a combination of words that can capture all of that in the aftermath of an occurrence like that.
What were the challenges you faced when adjusting back to civilian life?
Well, there was the lack of structure from throughout day-to-day life, and there was just a real void where all of the accountability used to be. I didn't really have anyone to answer to, and there weren't nearly as steep of consequences if I were to make mistakes or, say, blow something off or be late to something. And there was no overall direction that was being consistently provided for me. It was strange trying to figure out exactly how I should proceed as far as making my own way goes, after having been given such specific instruction for everything else in the years preceding. All the small things throughout day-to-day life, like relaxing after a day of work, or watching a show that you enjoy on TV, or having a cold beer at the end of the day, or seeing a friend or loved one or spending time with them. It's hard to explain. There's less overall pleasure involved with it. And then even throughout those day-to-day experiences, even at the moments where I could tell that my brain was registering that it was a good thing and that it was positive, it's like the other half of that didn't quite pick up. It didn't register the right way, if that makes sense. Throughout my time in the service, and particularly the 12 months of deployment, I kind of assumed in the back of my head that afterwards I would enjoy everything more, just because I wouldn't take it for granted nearly as much as I had at earlier times in my life. I feel like if the average citizen did know more about it or have a deeper understanding of it, that there would be a deeper appreciation for the people who have gone through it, and also a better understanding for the future to hopefully prevent some of the things like that from happening. But at the same time, I don't know if it would be an entirely good thing. I mean, there's certainly positives to it, but then there's also the negative aspect of having to understand what it's like. Because I feel like that's a big role of people within the armed forces, is to do that and go have those experiences and go through those trials so that others don't have to. I feel like that's a big part of what the sacrifice is.
I feel like it's important simply because it's history, and history wants to be recorded, but it can't be recorded unless people come forward and tell it themselves. So I really feel like it's important in that sense. You know, we can read history books and all that kind of stuff about what America did and all the wars that it participated in, but we don't get the true sacrifice and the bravery just from reading the events in a textbook. You don't get that, but you get it from listening to a grandparent or someone who is actually there, who actually participated. That's real history, and that's why I think it's so important.
Was I still dream about this stuff. But you wouldn't think 70 years later you would. But I was 17.
You don't get that emotion from a textbook. A textbook can't make you feel the way that watching someone talk about something that actually happened to them does. You don't get that. You don't see them start to tear up, or you don't see the change in their face when they talk. So it's just way more personalized.
I think, and I think of this from time to time, I mean, I'm not a particularly religious guy, but if there's a hereafter, a heaven, say, I want heaven to be standing in a trench line at Cantierne, a few of my friends drinking coffee out of a can, out of a cigarette can. And I want that moment to like go on forever. That'd be great.
War can be really glamorized, and this shows you like there are obviously some great stories and that bring you to tears and happiness, but also seeing the realities of war and what it has done to these people, I mean, decades later.
You pretty much hid the fact that you were a Vietnam vet for a long time. Now that we're out of the closet, or whatever you want to call it, that's why I'm here, telling my story. Never had a chance to before. And whether it's going to be good for me or not, we shall see. So far, so good. I mean, got a lot of emotion doing this. A lot of emotion in me right now. But you guys need to know the true story about this stuff. What really happened, what went on. Yeah. So we thank you for doing this.
Perspective is understanding that when you go into a conflict, everyone thinks they're right, and it just makes you kind of rethink everything. You have to put yourself in the enemy's shoes as well and see, is this really worth it? Is this what we need to do?
This is can you turn that off for a minute?
Yeah. Yep.
I still had to process out of the military, and when I processed out of the military, I did the paperwork and everything, and when it was all said and done, they're like, okay, give me your IDs, you know, for you and your family. Okay, sign here. Okay, here's your DD-214, your discharge paper, and the gate is that way. And I was like, okay, well, how am I going to get home? You got to figure it out. That was it. No big hoop-de-doo party or nothing like that. You know, I'm done. I'm a civilian now, and that was it. We found the field of honor because it paid homage to the wars of the 1900s. You know, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Persian Gulf. And I never saw a memorial like that. And then they had the statues of all the different. I would go there to find peace, you know, because I was struggling, like, why, you know, why is this happening? I served my country, and I'm not getting anywhere, you know, what do they want me to do? But there was a sailor there, and the sailor's got his hands up like this, okay? And there's only two things in the world a sailor's doing like that, or it's either saying like peace, but peace should be the out, okay? So I'm saying in my head, you know, or he's waving something in because he had a vest on. So in my head, my wife's thinking, I'm like, he wants a cigarette. And at that time I smoked, so I'd always pull out a cigarette and I would put it in his fingers. You know, I go, there you go, shipmate, have a smoke on me. It was in the early 2000s that I started having difficulty. It was some tough times, you know. So I used to just go there and just think. When I was told, I had no clue what the hell it was. And I started doing research and finding out about it. You know, as a kid, you know, growing up, I used to, I watched a lot of old movies because of my parents, and we're much older, and my grandma. And I remember watching the story of Lou Gehrig, the baseball player, the Yankee Pride, I think was the name of it, Pride of the Yankees. That was about as much as I knew about it. It was a shock. You know, once I started doing the research and they said that you have 2 to 5 years to live after diagnosis, I was like, wow, really? Seriously? So I went into a real dark place, you know. It was hard. You know, there was days that I didn't want to wake up because I'm like, I don't want to. Because then you would start seeing like photos and videos of people that had it. I'm like, man, I don't want to be like that. You know, how you can't do nothing. You're gonna depend on so much on your family. You know, I went to a real dark place. And that's when, you know, like going back to like the field of honor question. That's when I was going up there a lot. just to, like, okay, you know, here I served my country, you know, did the best that I could, and this is what I get for it. You know, so I was I angry? No, just crushed. I'm in constant pain. My lower back, because of being in this. I got constant lower pain in my back. I got muscle twitches. Sometimes they don't stop. I got respiratory issues. I use a breathing machine at night and when I'm sitting around. The fatigue in my arms, the fatigue in my legs, you know, just overall fatigue, you know, but it's not from doing anything. It's just the signal from my brain to my muscles in the wiring has got a short, you know. But yeah, you know, it's the pain. The pain is always there, always will, you know. And they say that ALS, MMD is a painless disease. I mean, nah, wrong. The biggest struggle is every day. What am I going to be able to do today? Is something going to be taken away? You know, is there another twitch going to come in which will result in more weakness? You know, am I going to lose the ability in fingers more? You know, my shoulders are weaker. Now is the forearms going to be more? You know, what's the next step? You know, it's pretty much like what's going to be taken away from me today? You know, that's the biggest.
What is the long-term diagnosis for you?
The long-term diagnosis is pretty much, if you want to say death, because there is no cure, and they can't reverse it. How I developed motor neuron disease is a very good question. A lot of us have our speculations on how we got it. Some people say, you know, believe that it was the environment. Some people believe it was vaccinations, because we were given a crap ton of shots, and the shots might have been tested and okayed, but when you're given a mass amount of shots of all different types, you don't know how they're going to react, and then everyone's genome is so different. Because the veterans population is twice as likely to develop motor neuron disease or ALS than the general population, okay? For some reason, Gulf War veterans are even twice higher, okay? So then now that's 4 times. But you're talking about a small community as in itself, you know, in the veterans community. You know, we're not as big as the civilian side, you know, so here I am, you know, we're 4 times, you know, 4 times the likely to develop ALS or motor neuron disease. There's got to be something. So it didn't have a particular branch, you know, it didn't have a particular location. So what really caused it? I don't know. And out of all those veterans that I used to deal with, I'm the only one left. The common denominator in all of us was the vaccinations. So I lean towards that. But, you know, I'm not a doctor, you know, and I'm not a scientist, so I really don't know.
Can you describe the 4-year struggle to get VA benefits?
So you're fighting and fighting and fighting. You know, I would go to DC and I would testify, you know, I would speak to congressmen and senators. to help them and get us, support, to get this service connected. So it was a lot of speaking, a lot of interviews, a lot of telling my story. It was tough. A lot of times it brought back stuff that you kind of want to put away. Bad times, sad times. But, every time you would tell your story, those bad times and sad times come forward again. So it was some tough times. Even after they made it service connected, I still had to fight to get mine. Because I don't know if the VA wasn't reading fully all my diagnoses, because I've got quite a few illnesses, but MND was the main category. And when they finally said, yeah, you're 100%, this is what you're gonna get, it was the biggest freaking celebration. I freaking cried. I was able to give things now to my family that I wasn't able to before. I call ALS the monster. That's because it's the scariest thing I've ever faced. I met a young man from Alabama named Eric when I was in DC last year at the ALS Advocacy Days. He was 24 years old, his whole life ahead of him, but the only thing he could move was his toes. He could not speak, he could not breathe without a ventilator, he couldn't even nod his head or wink an eyelid, but he was alive. You could see life in his eyes, that he knew exactly what was happening, and that's why I call ALS the monster. I know that ALS MND will do. It can strike anyone, regardless of age, gender, or race. It is not discriminating, and it is fatal, usually an average of 2 to 5 years. What you don't see is the real impact of the disease. I want to be able to watch my son graduate high school, and I did that. I want to be able to walk my daughter down the aisle on her wedding day. I want to grow old with my wife, Kumi, and play with our grandkids. To do all that, I need a treatment for ALS MND, and I hope you will act quickly and reauthorize PDUFA and help me fight against the monster. And I don't have to wait.
It was on a Valentine's Day. I want to say it was in Valentine's Day of 2013. And I had decided to stay at my mom's house that night because at the time I was pretty much just couch hopping. But I was there, and then I had woke up in the middle of the night, and I had some drugs on me. So I woke up in the middle of the night and did some. Then all I remember is walking from the kitchen to the living room to get back to the couch where I was sleeping. And then everything just kind of went black. It actually started with while I was on the PSD platoon in QRF for the Coast Province. And I actually had an ingrown toenail, which physically is incredibly insignificant. It's not even an injury, it's just an inconvenience. But at the same time, since we were on Salerno, I did have to seek medical attention before it got infected. Since I wasn't able to stay off of it, he wrote me a prescription for pain medicine. And it was when I started taking those, just for the short window of time that covered that particular prescription, that I realized that not only did it help a lot with any physical pain that I might feel then, but it also made all of my responsibilities and duties a lot easier mentally. And I didn't think nearly as much about the bad things that had happened or might happen, or even the ones that were about to happen. And it just, it gave me a means to sort of check out mentally. It was the easy way out, and it was a little too appealing at that time. So it wasn't long before an actual physical dependency for them followed. So obviously that's one of the problems that inevitably followed me back to the States, and then from there the habit continued. Just everything fell apart. The transition was pretty difficult on its own, but then once you factor in the drug dependency, it became almost impossible to function normally. Then my social life started becoming more and more non-existent, and then the friends that had maintained contact with me just slipped more and more and more to the wayside, and that is to include family and loved ones also. And then towards the end of my active duty service, even my work suffered tremendously. Everything from my actual skills and performance at work to my work ethic itself. But once I got back to Rockford, prescription pain medications don't seem to be nearly as accessible. Either that, or I didn't know where to go about getting them. But unfortunately, one of the things that is readily accessible in Rockford is heroin, which is essentially the same thing. It's just it's stronger than the pain meds, and it's not regulated at all. So that was kind of the natural continuation of the pill dependency. It was on May 1st of 2014. It actually wasn't a specific event or anything that caused that. I just remember waking up that morning and feeling sick, like always, and then just not sure what caused it exactly, but I'd had enough and decided that I was done with it at that point. Then was able to stay away from it long enough to give myself a chance.
How was that journey?
Definitely really challenging at first. It's just one of those things where all you can do is take it one day at a time, day by day, and keep reminding yourself that it will get better as time goes on. And it did, considerably. I'd say that in just about every way, I'm a lot better than I ever thought that I could have been, especially at some of the times that seemed more hopeless in the past. And I'm really grateful to be where I am.
Now, there's many veterans that have gone through the same issues, post-war issues that you've dealt. For somebody who's going through that struggle right now, what advice would you give them?
That it's never too late to make the positive changes that need to be made, no matter what you've lost. While it's true that some things that you lose, you really can't regain. To try to act like you can fix everything is just, it's unrealistic. It's just going to lead to disappointment. And you can't change the past or any bad things that have happened or bad things that you've done. But one thing you can do is decide how your future goes. It's always worth striving to make those positive changes for the future, regardless of your past.
Why are you sharing your story with the Harlem Veteran Project?
Why not? You know, I'm not no war hero. But I'm not a nobody. I'm a guy that served, and we all have a story. It doesn't matter if you're storming the beaches of Iwo Jima, you know, or the beaches of Normandy. It doesn't matter if you're in the Mekong Delta, on the Chosin Reservoir, or storming the desert during Desert Storm, or up in the hills in Afghanistan. We all have a job. We all have a story. For people to know that not everybody, you know, that's in the military was like combat, and, but we all did a job, you know, and this is my story, and that's my job, and that's what I did, you know, to get it out there and to tell. I think it helps a lot of veterans in a good way. Some veterans, like I said, you know, they don't tell their stories to their family. They keep it bottled up inside, keep it hidden. And to be able to get it out is kind of like therapeutic, you know, for a lot of them. You know, and others, you know, they might not want to talk about it because it might be like too bad of a scar. But once they start talking about it, they can move on. You know, it's therapeutic, you know, in a lot of ways.
Now, if I remember correctly, I believe Don Allen gave you my number and you called us.
Yes.
Am I correct on that?
Yep.
Why did you make that call?
He said that it had helped him a lot, you know, talking about things like this and getting them out in the open, and that also the ultimate goal was to, you know, raise awareness and things like that.
Do you feel, talking to us the first time, talking to us now, do you feel that it does help?
I think so, yeah. I think it would help, especially for individuals who haven't at all tried to open up or get it out there or discuss it or anything like that yet.
Why does discussing something that took place, why does that help, do you think?
Because then, I don't really know exactly. I guess just because then you're getting it out there, so to speak, so that those memories and that experience are at least somewhere besides exclusively inside of your own head. That they, I think that things can become more manageable when, whether it's real or just symbolic, that these things, anything bad can become more manageable when you're not the only one dealing with it or thinking about it.
A lot of times, like when the veteran's story is being told, the veteran stays alive. You know, he might be gone physically, or she, but the story lives on forever. You know, to me, that's huge.
Because you care. To know you care is all that we need, for the knowledge of this springs from your seed. You planted it firm right in our heart. You let us know this world we're a part, that we mean to you as much as we do, how you do your magic here from this school. You give us hope and a will to live. From your caring heart, you freely give. What you do for us, God will surely reward. You clothe us again in armor and sword. You give us the tools to stand and fight back. You give back our courage that we thought we lacked. You give freely of yourself and ask nothing in return. You raise our spirits, make that old spark burn. So thank you, HVP. You're heaven sent. Your love for us is love well spent.
What I've learned, that each veteran, good or bad, has something that they bring home. And either is a struggle that they have to deal with and overcome, or adapt to it and move on.
All right, when we first approached you about this project, kind of what were your thoughts?
I was a bit apprehensive at first, just because some of the subjects are of a bit of a personal nature.
At first, I was a little hesitant at first, but then I was like, you know what, let's do this. You know, I think it'll be fun.
What was the turning point? Like, what convinced you to do it, do you think?
I really don't know. Honestly, I just, I tentatively agreed to it, just because I have a bad habit of doing that, even if I don't intend to follow through. And then, you know, as the days kept going by and getting closer and closer, I would basically just avoid coming to a conclusion. And then when the day came, I just kind of went for it.
It was weird seeing myself that much on a big screen. But it was kind of like what I was expecting, you know, getting the stories out, you know, it was good. I liked it.
Overall, I'm really glad that I did it. And
why do you say that?
I feel like it was beneficial for myself just to get the things out there and sort of deal with them from a different view. And also certainly in the hopes that, you know, it might even help another person, even if it's just a small portion of as much as it might have helped me.
What do you admire most about Alex?
His hair. Something I don't have.
What do you admire about Jim?
Well, besides his, you know, strength and determination in dealing with things, definitely the beard. It's just so long and silky.
No, I like his strength, his courage to speak out about his issue. You know, his story. I like the courage that he has to speak out about it, because not many people would. You know, and I respect that. That's probably what I would say is what I like most about Alex, is that he's willing to speak about his personal struggle and get it out. You know.
My original impression was just proven right, that he's a good guy, but also that, you know, he has a lot of strength just to deal with the ALS and all the problems that come with it. And, you know, the fact that it is a progressive ailment and that it keeps getting worse, but that he still maintains such a positive outlook and attitude and still continues to do things regardless of that. It's really admirable.
What do you think about Alex's attempt at a beard?
I give him props. I see that he's been using beard oil because it's glistening in the sun.
Coconut oil.
That's the key, huh?
There it is. That's a wrap. We're done. We're done.
That's what the people came for.
All right. Anything you want to add, Jim?
You're thick.
You gonna use that footage?
Did you look up what chafers were?
This is Harlem Vet Talk.